We have one more panel to go, and I don't know about you guys, but I need to get a drink, so let's get through this panel. So I'm going to introduce our moderator, who is also our sponsor, Laura Bushnell. And just something I know about Laura. Actually, Laura and I met about 8 years ago. I wanted to go surfing in Costa Rica. So our mutual friend, Peter Thiel, said, you need to meet Laura. She's an amazing surfer. So when you watch her appear, think about her on a surfboard. I'm kidding. 10 years ago. Anyway, everyone, Laura Bushnell, this is going to be an amazing panel. This is about raising a Series A during this crunch. So, Laura?
Yeah, and then you can ring your panel before we get this out. Okay. So while I'm waiting for the panelists, I just wanted to say, first of all, Bambi, thank you very much for involving us in this really excellent and interesting opportunity. We're really excited to be able to support this event. We're very interested in entrepreneurship and supporting women entrepreneurs as well. So a little bit about me. I'm a partner in the law firm King & Spalding. I'm in the corporate practice group. King & Spalding is a law firm of about 850 lawyers and 18 offices around the world. We have an office in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, and I'm based in the Silicon Valley office, and we focus on startups. We represent companies of all different sizes, but we're really emphasizing our startup practice. And I just want to introduce you really quickly, if they'll stand up, my colleagues who are here today. All three of us are women, and we're all partners at King & Spalding in the Silicon Valley office and have an incredible amount of experience. First of all, Judy O'Brien. Judy's been in Silicon Valley for over 30 years. She incorporated Sun Microsystems and Juniper when they were tiny little companies and worked with them all the way through their IPO. Emma McConaughey, is she here? She may have had to step out. She's also a partner in our Silicon Valley office that works with technology companies on technology transactions, which is a mainstay for a lot of the startup and technology companies here. So I don't know, Bambi, do you know where our panelists are? Are they going to come? Oh, okay. Why don't we all come up? So while they're coming up here, we really like to support entrepreneurs, and we specialize at King & Spalding working with companies and entrepreneurs as they grow, working with them at the early stage and positioning them for high growth and advising on legal aspects of that to maximize value of the company for liquidity or exit event. Okay, hello everyone. So I think what I'm going to do, I'd like to let everyone introduce themselves, and I know Kristen was on a panel earlier, but just for everyone's benefit, in case they weren't here, if each of you could give a brief overview of your company, what rounds you've raised to date, and some of you have been at prior companies too. So why don't we start off with you, Carla?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Carla Gallardo, and I'm the CEO of Cuyana. Cuyana is an online fashion brand that believes in fewer, better things. So we've reinvented the supply chain of luxury brands. We've gone after suppliers that have excess capacity of those brands that have gone off to manufacture their products in China. We design and manufacture premium products with them and sell them to our customers at almost wholesale prices. That's our value proposition.
Hi, my name is Lynn Perkins. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Urban Sitter. We help parents and babysitters connect online. We've raised about $8 million to date through a seed series and then a Series A that we closed about a year ago.
Great. Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Goldstein. I'm the CEO of BackOps. We handle the accounting, finance, and HR for a whole lot of small businesses, including a lot of startups in Silicon Valley. I think over the last 15 years, I've helped hundreds of companies raise money. I'm also the chief compliance officer of a little organization called AngelList. We have I've seen a lot of things go right, a lot of things go wrong, and very happy to be here to share. Oh, and BackOps just raised an A in August.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I forgot to say how much money we raised.
Okay, how much money have you raised,
So
Carla?
sorry, I forgot. We've raised a 1.7 seed round, and we just closed a 1 million bridge last week prior to our Series A.
Congratulations. So what we wanted to talk about today are, with our experienced panel, kind of go over some lessons learned in raising your Series A. And we'll kind of walk through on a chronological basis the things you want to think about at each stage of fundraising from the company's perspective and the founder's perspective. But first of all, we were interested in finding out in our audience how many people here are first-time entrepreneurs. Okay, so we have a few. How many people have raised funds as the entrepreneur or founder or co-founder or officer of a startup company? Okay, so we have some experienced people here. And I think we've heard a theme today that things have changed over the last 10 years in terms of raising money, and there are certain things at play currently that affect the fundraising process. So what I'm going to do is just start by asking a few questions. I think the first one is, like, how, as a founder of a company, how do you figure out how much money you need, and when are you ready to go out to outside investors and raise that money? And I'll let anyone take that.
I can go ahead and jump in. So when we raised our seed round, we raised enough money to get us through our product development and through expanding into a second market. So we had 2 markets at the time that we had proven out that our concept was working there and that we had gained viable customer traction. And you could use the rule of thumb as sort of 12 to 18 months, or you could look at it in terms of goals that you want to accomplish. And then I would take that number and figure that you're going to need half that amount again, because everything always costs more than you think it's going to cost.
Okay. And so and what was the timing process? Like, when did you need to start thinking about the fundraising process? Like, how long in advance?
I think it really depends. It's kind of for the first phase, it's really dependent on where you and your co-founders are in terms of what you're willing to put in and how much money of your own you're willing to risk. For us, we decided to get our product out the door and launch before we raised any funding. And my other 2 startups, we raised money right away. So I think it just depends on your individual situation. We definitely closed both our seed series and our Series A much faster because we had gotten further down the path than I think we would have if we hadn't. But I think you need to be prepping for your funding at any point in time. So even today, I know what we're going to be looking for in our Series B and what goals I want to accomplish before we get there and what we'll do with the money. So I think you kind of always have to have it on your mind. I think it takes months of kind of lead up to get the right list of people interested. And then once you actually are ready to pull the trigger, I actually think you need to do it very quickly, within 3 weeks to 6 weeks.
Carla or Kristen?
In my experience, the entire Series A process, soup to nuts, takes about 6 months. Great majority of it is back-end loaded for sure, but there's a lot of things you need to do to get ready for that. And you actually have to start a little bit earlier, kind of setting up the scene. For example, if you're going to take institutional money in your seed round, you have to be very cognizant of any sort of future signaling that could impact your A round. For example, if you have a very traditional institutional investor put a little bit of money in a seed round because he or she is kind of experimenting with something new that person is not familiar with, but it looks like fun, but then doesn't step up to invest in the A, as is the habit of that firm, it sends a tremendous negative signal that is inadvertent. So again, if you take a very traditional VC who tests the spray and pray method and decides that's not for him or her, you're kind of at the receiving end of that negative signal. So you have to be really careful.
How do you avoid that? How do you manage that? What can someone do?
You have to be really careful who you invite to your seed party. Really kind of think about, what if this person does or doesn't step up to the A for reasons completely outside of my control? What happens then? But the entire process of A does really take 6 months, any way you slice it. And at Backops, I literally get a report with the actual name stripped out to show me how many of our 100 companies in the network are at risk. And T-minus 6 months, all kinds of bells ring off, and we know exactly what we need to do to actually prep the company to that process. Like, hey, you're at T-minus 6 months, and this is why we think venture debt is probably the right route for you as opposed to an A, and we actually kind of go through a wizard.
That's a nice plug for backups, actually.
You know what, you have to, because if your customers don't make it, not good for you either.
Yep,
So,
yep. Carla?
Sure. The question is how to establish how much to raise, right?
Yeah, how do you figure out how much you need and when you're ready to do
Sure.
that?
So in our case, we had a huge, big vision, and what we did is we sliced it out in stages and set up milestones that will allow us to get to the next stage. So for our seed round, what do we need to accomplish that will get us to our Series A? And based on those milestones, we bootstrapped kind of, okay, how many employees do we need to get us there? Where are we going to invest our money? How are we going to make the best use in the most lean way possible so that we can show that we can spend little money and get us to certain returns? And that's actually the process that we just completed now. Really, it's about setting those milestones and be very clear about what those are. And even when you're raising, setting those in a very straightforward way with the investors that are investing in you so that when you reach to that point that you're ready for your Series A, it's very clear and you can even shorten that Series A fundraising process.
How did you deal with the uncertainty of not knowing how much, or maybe if you were going to have to pivot or try something different, or just I heard you say, Lynn, that it's going to take you twice as much as you think. How do you deal with that uncertainty as you're planning and budgeting?
I'm actually going to be very candid because I am a first-time entrepreneur, and so when we fundraised for our seed round, our first meetings were a huge learning experience for us, and the amount of money that we thought we needed was really, really low. And so compared to what we actually did. So it really helped to have meetings at the beginning that were with those, not our top target investors, so that we could learn as much as possible. And we ended up learning that we were being too, we needed more money than what we thought we did. And it was more about finding the right investor that can lead you and can help you get to the next stage. And it's actually echoing your point. For us, Canaan invested in us. Maha spoke in the panel earlier, and we raised enough to get us through Series A, but we actually ended up needing a bridge because we forecasted that we would get to the point where we are with a certain amount of money, but now we are at a point where we know that we can get an even better valuation for our Series A. And so if you have an investor that's aligned with you and that can help you there, benefits both parties. It helps us and it helps them to get a better valuation later. And so why not wait to get us through the holiday season, have a better valuation, and then raise? So it's really about finding an investor that you trust and that can help you there.
For that bridge, did you have a specific milestone? You said you wanted to get through the holiday season. Was that going to be a critical milestone for you?
Yeah, it's really critical. Well, we are in retail, and so holiday really represents anywhere between 50 to 70% of our revenues. And we are at a point right now where we can't satisfy demand with the amount of employees we have, and we need more hands and we need more people. And so we either go out and I stop working in the office and I go to raise the Series A, or we get a certain amount of money that will get us through the holidays in a successful way, and then I'm able to leave the office and fundraise.
I think raising, I think it's really hard to do a proper estimate to gauge how much money you will need, but I think it's a really important exercise to actually draw a line in the sand so you know why you went over or under. And I think a general rule of thumb is that growing a startup is like remodeling your house. It'll take twice as long and take twice as much money. So the second time around, you kind of know that remodeling your house. So you should keep that in mind.
Okay. Anything to add, Lynn?
You mentioned pivoting, and I think that's a really interesting topic. I think one thing that you can do to allow yourself some room to pivot, but also keep your investors aligned with you on your focus, is to set your goals for each series of money you raise to be goals that are maybe potentially proving something. Maybe they aren't hard, fast numbers, but hey, at the end of this series, I want to be able to prove to you that I'm going to be able to acquire customers at a rate that's 1/3 of what I think the lifetime value of the customer is, whatever it might be. So that when you find yourself in a position where you are going to slightly pivot, you can go back and say, hey, this is what we've learned. Because they expect you to learn during this phase. Otherwise, they don't want to invest in people who have their blinders on completely. You need to be focused, but you also need to recognize that you need to change things for your customers. And so I think having goals that allow you to pivot based on a really good reason, based on things that you learn along the way, it's okay. I think the thing that always makes me nervous with pivoting is when I hear people say, oh, I heard that investors are really into this right now. Well, you shouldn't mold your business based on what you think people want to get you your funding. It just isn't. It's not a successful strategy.
Yeah, we've heard that from as a theme today, I think, too, like not going with the trendy thing of the day, but kind of maybe being contrarian or sticking to your guns. And one of the things Maha said, she said that some of the companies at the early stage will change something in their plan 10 times in 6 months.
But you have to be really careful not to over pivot. Again, going back to the remodeling analogy, you don't want to be doing a lot of the while you're at it type of add-ons that may not help you prove the bare minimum you need to prove to know exactly where you need to go after that point.
Yeah, it seems staying focused there's going to be a benefit to staying focused. Okay, unless anyone else has a comment, I wanted to move on to another question. How do you go about finding appropriate investors? How do you figure out who to approach? When you've decided, okay, I know how much I need to raise, I'm ready to go, how do you figure out who to talk to? Carla, you want to start?
I can tell you how we went about it. For us, first we wanted to really learn how investors think about the process. I mean, just being new to the space, we met with as many different investors, and also that invest in different spaces. Because when you're basically going to marry your investor, and how to go about that is really learning about what type of person they are, how they view the product that you are working on, whether they believe in your vision, whether they're going to help you or they're going to try to guide you through a different way, which is the trend theme that we're talking about. And so for us, it was about kind of just throwing out a big net and trying to meet as many people as possible, and then realizing in our case that for us, really, then taking a second step at it and just focusing on women was the best way to go about it, because women really understood our product. I mean, we're talking about a fashion brand, and so getting that point across and talking about it as a brand and not as a tech product was something that really resonated with women more than men, that women believed in it. We didn't have to really explain the value prop of a high quality product with a story. And so it was more of a process of learning and just meeting different people, and then really finding those who believed in our vision and our product without us having to just, have to prove that many times over.
Lynn?
For us, the way we started, I looked at themes in our business. So for us, it's payment, leveraging social networks. It's a parent-focused business. So I would pick out themes in a business, and then I would use AngelList or other sources to look at which investors are invested in those spaces, not in competitive businesses, but in businesses where they understand transaction, or for instance, in our case, like doing services via mobile is a big piece of what we are. So I narrowed down the investor list that way, and then I looked at LinkedIn to figure out who I was connected to, and then ultimately ended up focusing a lot of our seed investment time on VCs that focus specifically at the seed stage, which has ended up being incredibly beneficial for us. I can't say enough about working with VCs that if you're getting seed funding, VCs that only deal at the seed stage are great because they get your space. And also, when you do go to raise that next round, there is no conflict of what's their focus. They are your ally because it's to their advantage to get you funded by the best possible investor for the next round, and they can really work with you on that. So that's how we narrowed it down.
Kristen?
I think it's really important to keep in mind that you're marrying not only that partner, but the entire firm, and keep that in perspective. It's no secret that you have to consider the life cycle of the fund that you're going into, meaning is there going to be enough money when you need the next round for that partner to pull the trigger and get you the next round. But keep in mind that the career stage of your advocate at the firm actually matters as well, because I've seen great companies not get the attention they need from a firm because the original scout or the very junior person who brought that company into the fund just didn't have the political capital to really push to get the attention that the company needed. I've also seen the converse where the super senior partner thought that the space or the company was really hot and sexy and kind of grabbed it and then kind of promptly forgot because maybe the space fell out of favor or something else happened. Or the partner had some huge hit and kind of checks out, and then again, the company is orphaned. So it's really important to pick the right person at the right phase of their career within the fund to kind of get it all right.
It's an interesting comment because it's almost like you need someone that's going to be advocate on your behalf when they're, up against the partners or trying to say why the firm should put more money in.
Exactly. I mean, you might have gotten funded from a really great company that has direct access to, let's say, let's say you needed Apple's partnership to get something done, and if this fund gets to call Apple twice a year, are you going to be one of those 2 calls? Are you important enough? Does the partner at the fund representing you have that pull and the incentive? I mean, you have to ask yourself that question.
So, we heard from our prior panel that the VCs are doing a lot of homework and they're getting very focused on specific areas. So it seems like as a founder, if you do your homework and really, you can find the right people by looking, by LinkedIn or by doing searches, like who's investing in the space, who has the knowledge, because that person is going to be important.
And I think most investors will be very impressed if you have a very specific, granular reason as to why he or she is that perfect person for you, as opposed to, I would love to be part of your fund because it's such a great brand. I mean, they've heard that 1,000 times.
Yeah. Well, maybe a little flattery will get you somewhere too, right?
Always.
I'm going to add to that because I actually think that's a really interesting point. So even in a meeting, you can read in a VC meeting within 5 minutes whether it's going well or not. And even in the meetings where it's not going well, it's always a great opportunity to ask the people which of their investments they've learned something in recently, or which spaces are they interested in. You can always gain information out of a VC meeting that will benefit you at your next one. Absolutely. And so don't forget that as much as you may feel like you're looking to them for something, get something out of the meeting as well.
Absolutely.
So let's move to that, because let's say you have your list, you've got your meetings, you've reached out to people, and you have a meeting. What are some things you can do to learn? When you start pitching, you're going to be learning and getting feedback. What should you be thinking about, and what do you do with that feedback?
So I think that first, even before heading into the meeting, you need quite a few different practice sessions with either entrepreneur friends that have raised money in the past or professors from school that can help you, because the way that you sometimes are, you can be very passionate about your idea, and the way that you're framing it makes a lot of sense to you, but once you are in front of other people that have never heard of the idea, the messages might not get across in the way that an investor, will be receptive to. And so for us, it was practicing beforehand, but then the second piece of it is once you're in there, you are going to get a lot of feedback during the meeting, and you are going to want to change a lot of things in your presentation, and the hardest one is change your vision because of what trends are going on in the market. And so for us, for example, when we were raising at that point, e-commerce was becoming big through the subscription model, and we were an e-commerce business, and our business idea of sourcing different products from around the world was perfect for that subscription model that investors were investing at that point. And so probably 80 to 90% of the investors we met with pushed us to move into that business model. And so sticking to your vision and just keep meeting with more and more people without really changing what you believe in is really key. And right now we are extremely happy. We were able to find Keenan, who actually believed in our vision, and we didn't change it to a subscription model, which is now failing. So I would say those 3 steps are important when you meet with investors.
Quickly to that point, I think it's really important to show how authentic you are. If you are feeding the investor the phrase du jour, they'll see right through it. I mean, I think currently everyone is the Uber of blank, and that will definitely, create the Batmobile. They'll shut down, and they're not going to hear the next word you're going to say.
I guess on that note, I would say that make sure that you're listening to the investors' feedback during your presentation. I'm a big fan of very few slides and making it much more conversational, because then you may pick up on things that the investor is saying. So if an investor is asking me a lot about payment or a lot about our users' time spent on mobile, whatever it is, it's like, okay, well, that's clearly an area of interest to them, and so I'll cater part of the conversation to that topic. And it works. I think having a much more conversational discussion, especially the first time you meet them, is very important.
Okay.
If you have more than 10 slides, everything beyond the 11th slide should be an appendix.
I know there are a lot of resources out there that you can find in putting together the pitch, and less is more. Is there anything you would say, based on your experiences, that you should always have or always cover in your slide deck or in your presentation? Any kind of do's and don'ts?
Know your market very well, because, either you're meeting with investors that already know the market really well, and you might say things that are not correct. They also want to learn from you a lot. And when we were pitching about e-commerce at that point, it was 2010. Really having great insights about the industry is very important, and really knowing your market. And then it depends on what stage you're in. For us, we didn't even have customers at that point, but I think that right now, really know your customer, and just those metrics that just show that you really understand the business you are in. I think that's.
I would say Rebecca from Morgan Thaler mentioned something that for every business she sees, there's 6 others, so she can pick from the 7 which one she wants to invest in. And with that, I would say talk about your team, sell them on your team, because they're not only just buying into the idea, but they're also buying into your team. And so prove to them that you're the one that's going to execute it. And I also say it's okay to talk about some lessons learned. So in our business, I always give an example. There's when we built our site, something happened where we showed these certain connections, and it wasn't intentional. It was just one of the things that came along with it. And little did we know that would be the main way that users on our site get the most out of the site. And so I always say, we discovered this, and as a result, we've modified our user operations support this way, and we've done this. I think they want to also understand that you're a thinker, and you're going to solve problems or see positive opportunities when they come up.
The seed stage is definitely about the idea. A stage is most definitely not about the idea. It's about, can the team execute to be that survivor in a credit space, because if ideas are pretty easy to replicate. I know that most investors look for good team, and what does that mean? It means, honestly, how hungry is the team? It's not just about the IQ or the experience. Will this person go down with the ship trying? And sometimes the answer is no. And a lot of the success that we see are from people who can't fail, so they don't. And that's important to consider.
Well, we've heard that today too, like having vision, and I've heard in the past passion is important.
I think it's beyond passion. I've had teams actually make a presentation, and it's funny, but it's not, where the CEO gets up and says, "Here are my key team members. Most of us, just left our 3rd failed startup. We have to make this one work, or we all have to go work at Oracle, which would be really terrible."
Has that worked? Have you seen that work?
I've seen it work. You make it work if you have to make it work.
Okay. So I'm going to ask a question, because this, after all, was organized around the women entrepreneur. I'm just curious how each of you think gender affects, or how has it affected the process of raising money, if at all? And I'd be interested in hearing from each of you on this. Carla, do you want to start? Or,
wow.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Gender of the entrepreneur or gender of the VCs?
Well, you could do both, right? We're focused to women entrepreneurs, so maybe start with that.
Wow. Okay, so I'd like to separate the actual gender of the entrepreneur from the leadership style of the entrepreneur. There are a lot of men with feminine styles and women with masculine styles. I tend to have a very masculine style. One of the things that I see over and over again in entrepreneurs with feminine styles is that they're not very clear on communicating urgency, as in the train is leaving the station. Unless you commit in the next 6 days, the doors will close. And I often find that unfortunately those with feminine styles often don't value their time. And so the time management becomes kind of an issue in fundraising. They kind of let the window slide open wider.
So that means when you're communicating timing for raising money and instilling a sense of urgency and
Is
moving
very
driving
important,
process.
And those with masculine styles tend to be better at that,
Interesting.
whether male or female.
I would say I haven't found gender to be a hindrance at all in terms of raising money. I would agree. I think that maybe women tend to take things a little more personally, and you have to just look at raising money as a bit of a game. And you can't take it personally. You may meet someone who's the most amazing partner for you, and they just invested in your space 2 weeks ago, or they're not the right part of their fund. You can't. You have to walk out of each meeting and just kind of take it very black and white. Okay, on to the next one. And I think if you look at it more as a process and less about, it's not them insulting your business personally if they don't like it, you can force a result a lot faster too. And I think it's really important. Like, I can't stress enough the time urgency piece of it. And if you really want to get around close, you absolutely, whether it's for real or not, you have to force a time frame on the deal.
Yeah, I don't like to think about gender when it comes to these things. I think that, so I come from a banking background, and I think I was the only girl in my math class when I was in college. And I think that thinking about it kind of limits you in a way. So it's just about really being passionate about what you want, going in those meetings, you know, and just being as aggressive as you can be, and just being true to yourself. Gender shouldn't matter. Really, it's about what you believe in, and just, you know, go for it and be strong about it. That's my message. Sorry.
No, that's interesting. Going back to some of the things you said earlier, how do you determine if someone's not the right fit? And this might be a hard one for people because it's hard to raise money, and it's hard to get a term sheet and someone willing to give you money to fund it. But how do you figure out if someone's not the right fit, and maybe you ought to consider turning down that money? What are things to think about based on your experience?
I think the first place to start is with references. So I didn't just reference my VCs on companies that were doing well. I called companies that had them as an investor, and they either closed or went under. And I think it's a great sign to find out what your investors like when things aren't going as well.
Yeah, because as we know, some investments last longer than some marriages, right?
That's exactly right. I can't think of a partnership more important outside of marriage. And I hate to say it, but you just kind of know when you meet that right institutional investor. You feel it, and I'm not a touchy-feely person, that this person or this entity is going to help create something amazing with you. It's not just this antiseptic process of analyzing and reference checking and going through some sort of wizard. It's really this all-encompassing, like, wow, you know that this is the right person for you in a number of ways.
One kind of anecdotal story. So one of our investors actually scares me a little bit, and I really like him. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he's in a half an hour, he can get more done than most people do in 2 hours. And I love that he's actually not touchy-feely, and he calls me out on my stuff all the time. So I tend to go in with the, like, here's what we're doing great on. And he, you know, he can obviously see through the writing and points out the things like that we need to work on. And for me, that's great. I need someone, because it's hard when you're CEO. There are very few people who hold you accountable except for your partners. And so I purposely chose someone who keeps me on my toes.
Very good.
I think I already talked a little bit about this, but for us, it was really about finding the investor who really understood what we were trying to do, and it ends up being that women investors really understood what we were trying to do. And at that stage, that was important because we didn't have anything. It really was an idea. So how do we explain a great brand or high quality at an affordable price? I think it was easier for women investors to understand that. Now at this stage, we have a brand, we have products, we are out there, so the strategy is different, and so gender doesn't really matter. I think you just know. I agree. I mean, for us, we just walked in, and just when when the conversation goes from you pitching to you just conversating about your idea, coming up with even better ideas during the meeting, I think that's when you know it's a right fit. And granted, that's kind of a cool situation to be in most of the time. And let's be real, you really are. You're struggling, you're pitching. Most of investors are not going to want to give you money. So most of us don't have that luxury of being able to pick. So that's actually another problem that I think is more realistic. And how do you go about that? It's, it gets to a point where you either have to stop, or you might have to choose somebody that's not the most ideal one, but you have to choose from what you have, the best option.
So we're getting close to the end, so I wanted to ask a question, and for those on our panel who've raised multiple rounds in prior companies, we've heard about macro trends and how the environment is different today for fundraising than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So Lynn and Kristen, anything you'd want to share with our audience about what you learned? What have you learned based on your fundraising over the years? What's different today? What should a founder, a CEO keep in mind when raising money? Is there anything particular, or tips or stories you want to share?
You want to raise money when you can, not when you have to. It's interesting. The environment has definitely changed. People talk about the Series A crunch, and I think it's important to kind of think about it in kind of the different pockets of companies that are raising money. The companies that don't need money but could take it to take the company to much higher level are having no problem raising A. The money is just knocking on their door. The companies that I see having trouble raising an A, they're not quite there, having proved what they needed to prove to kind of get to that point. So I think the Series A crunch is not this universal beta. I think there's some alpha in that analysis.
I would agree. First of all, we raised both of our rounds during the summer, and everyone always says, oh, I'm going to raise in September when all the VCs are back from vacation. Well, if you find people who aren't on vacation, you're going to get a lot more of their time in the summer, and you can actually use that to your advantage. And you can say, hey, listen, I'm just out meeting with 4 or 5 people right now. Come fall, I'm going to actually put on the gas, and then, hey, if you want to preempt this, great. If not, come fall, I might have other people. I might not come back to you. And it's crazy to say that with a straight face, but you have to do it. And
it's the urgency.
It's the urgency. And so we raised both of our rounds in the summer, and we're raising our Series B right now when we don't need it. And it's because we're able to say this is what we're going to do with the money, and it's opportunistic to take it now because it'll help the growth of the company. And the other thing I would say is that from what I hear, it's getting a lot harder to go from your seed round to your A right now. And part of that is that investors, there's so many deals that were done in the seed stage, and I think people who got seed money, it was an interesting time because you have seed-focused funds, you have bigger institutional firms that were giving money to partners and saying, sure, go dabble in 12 deals a year. And not all of these firms had a strategy of how they would deal with these after the seed round, so it is getting tougher. And so I think the main thing I would suggest is just making sure that when you do take money from somebody, you're very, very aligned on what a positive outcome with that money would look like, because you're much more likely to get them to either fund your A or support your A if you've been able to approve those goals. So make sure that you're aligned in what success would look like.
And those goals don't move on you midstream.
I revisit our goals every board meeting. I pull up that as my first slide. Remember when we met with you? This is what we said we were going to accomplish. Here's where we are. And you just have to drill it in to make sure that everyone's always on the same page.
Those are great comments. Thank you. Unless there's any questions from the audience. Yes?
I have a question. I think valuation is kind of always one of the black boxes of figuring out the first-time entrepreneur. And you each raised money from Canaan. Each raised about 1.7 million. I think, Carla, you guys had like a 5.5 pre, and I think you guys maybe had a 4.5 pre. I mean, how does that dialogue take place to negotiate that pre money?
So we actually, Canaan's an A investor. Our seed investment was led by First Round Capital. but in both cases, similar situation. We kind of gave a range of what we were looking to raise. Don't ever give a set amount or they'll back into the number that they want your valuation to be. We gave a range, and then we actually got multiple term sheets, and so we had a little wiggle room. But truthfully, in a seed round, there's kind of like a set, I mean, 3 to 5 million is kind of the typical pre-money valuation, and then it goes from there. We had a lot more negotiating leverage on our A, but I think in a seed round, I don't think there's really, unless you have a team that was in the top 20 at Facebook or whatever. I think you're kind of captive to the formula.
I tend to agree about the C, but there's a lot of wiggle room in the A. We were really fortunate because we had VCs approach us about raising an A, and we were in the position to say, we're actually sitting on our seed. We didn't spend a dollar of it, and we may never spend any of it. And so the valuation was really what we were willing to take, and we just did nothing until the term sheets got better and better and better, and then decided to take one.
It kind of worked out well.
I mean, we were kind of in that same position, and I think that ultimately one thing I will tell you is we took a term sheet from Canaan that was slightly less attractive than our best term sheet, but the people were the right fit. So that was, for us, that carried more of a success weight to it. But there's a book by Noam Wasserman. I don't know if anyone's read it, but he's a Harvard professor, and he's looked at 150,000 startup companies and what leads to success, and I highly recommend it because it talks about the team structure. It talks about the types of rounds that you raise, and it's just statistically, it's fascinating. So I recommend it.
What was the name?
I think he's Noam, Noam. I think it's Wasserman. But if you Google like Harvard professor startup success and failure rate, you'll find it. But it talks about you ask like who's on your team. It talks about who you should bring on as your team. It talks about how much you should raise and when you should raise it. And it's all based on sheer volume of analysis that he did. And it's actually, if you look at companies that have been successful, it's interesting to see how many fall in the along those spectrum.
It's Founder's Dilemma.
Oh, thank you. Founder's Dilemma.
And team composition is so, so important to get straight. At the seed stage, you want the firstborns, people who come in and tell you how it's going to be. A little bit later, you kind of want the latterborns who bring a little bit more life and fun into the organization, because if you just keep it to the firstborns, they are like, oh, we have to have fun now. Let's cue the fun. Let's plan for the fun. And that doesn't really build great culture, so you have to know exactly when to bring certain types of people into the organization. That's really important.
Carla, any last
Sure.
words?
No, I think that there's a market rate when you're in a seed round. So echoing what you said, 3 to 5 million, and then if you're going to do a convertible note, there's a market rate for the discount rate or the cap that you're going to use. So really, it's about just trying to find, to negotiate for that best of what the market rate is at that stage, and that's what we tried to do. Canaan for us was our sole investor in our seed round, and so it was really about being aligned, and of course there was some negotiation time, but at the end of the day, they wanted us to be happy. We wanted them to be happy, and when it comes to making a deal, both parties have to walk away being happy. And obviously there's the negotiation period, but it's easier on the seed round just because there's that market rate that you can guide yourself from.
So maybe spend a little less time worrying about that and focus
definitely.
on the
And do homework, because friend entrepreneurs are raising. Talk to your legal counsel. Your legal counsels they're closing deals every day. They know what the market rate is. Like for convertible notes, it's shifted what the discount rate is from last year to this year. So it's really about doing a lot of homework about what's going on in the market for seed rounds. Because for those, companies can be in different industries, but there's kind of that range that everybody's looking at.
But I think it's really important to keep in mind that there's definitely some politics around managing your syndicate. And it's amazing what certain totally unrelated new entrants to the partnership could do to the pricing. There's no collusion.
All right. Well, we're cutting into our happy hour. So with that, thank you very much to our panelists. And thank you.